Welcome, everybody. Today's debate is around what's better, Slack or Teams, and how to use them or benefit from their uh, value proposition, I guess. So, the first question is going to be a rather fun one. If Slack and Teams were people, how would you describe their personality? So, I quite like that. And I'm going to ask that question going up from the screen, top right. Who we got here? Russ. Um, I want your answer, then we'll follow by Tim and then Ryan. Sound good? You're up first.
Look, I'm not going to answer that, Christian. Oh,
Sorry, someone's breaking up.
I'm on mute.
Yeah, I think it's Ross's
I'm
internet.
not on mute. I'm not.
You might
Your
need to
connectivity's
cut
got a bit funny.
your camera.
Well, I can go ahead and go. while we're waiting for
The
Russ.
kids are back from school and they're all hugging his internet bandwidth. So that's probably why.
Go ahead, Tim.
Yeah. All right.
All right.
I did not come up with people. I came up with horses. And
Okay.
I see Slack as like your Clydesdale, your draft horse. It just powers through, can get stuff done, can be used in situations it's not really designed for, and it's just big and clunky. Teams is a racing thoroughbred. It's fast, it's agile, gets stuff done, does it quickly, and is built on a great platform, has great genetics behind it. That's where I'm at. And I say that kind of tongue in cheek.
Right.
Yeah.
You and I might not be friends after this. Right. Russ, I think you're back. Your turn.
Well,
So,
I'm not sure I am.
dear
Can you hear me?
friends,
Can you hear me?
Russ, we can hear you, I think.
Okay, perfect. Well, here's a platform that we're on that made some adjustments to improve my audio, and then everybody told me they couldn't hear me. So I like what Tim is saying about, this finely tuned engine. I'm not gonna agree with you on the Microsoft product being a finely tuned thoroughbred. I'm not there at all. I think that could be, and I will reveal soon that I'm not a user of Slack. I don't use Slack, but I'll explain why, because that's more interesting. I think Slack is the thoroughbred. I think Slack is the one that's completely tuned to the job that it needs to do. But we did mention in the pre-chat, we talked about Skype, which in its original incarnation was a pretty lean thing, and it just did what it was supposed to do. So yeah, and I'm sorry, Christian, I'm not playing the if you were an animal, what kind of animal would your product be? That's too much like the 1980s marketing stuff that used to go on.
That wasn't me. Don't bring me into this animal thing. That's Tim. So don't you dare. I'm going to be a stickler on the language here.
Hey, I
did
come
not
by this
mention
gray
anything
hair
about
very
animals.
honestly. Yeah, I come by my gray hair very honestly. And to your point, Skype, I loved Skype. And when Microsoft bought the application and it created Skype for Business, I went, what did they do? To be honest, I'm a Linux bigot. I love everything about it. I've never been a Microsoft fanboy except for two products. And one was Visio, which Microsoft bought. They didn't even develop. And that, to me, Visio was just amazing. And the other one has been Teams, and Microsoft bought that application as well. It used to be called Skype. They took all of the technology from Skype and they put it into Teams, and that's where they started. And I think that while it has some ways to go, I completely agree with that statement. It has got so much potential, especially from team coordination and team collaboration. To me, I mean, the name of it is appropriate.
So, Ryan, if it was a personality, what would they be, or which one are you going for? I know your answer, but
I
let's make it a public, shameful statement.
You don't know my answer. I had this image of Rocky Balboa and Apollo Creed as teams versus Slack. And the reason why I came up with that is that I see teams rekindling itself or reinventing itself, much like Rocky reinvents himself each movie you have to watch, and we're probably on the 12th one now, which is kind of the same as teams. Whereas Slack and Apollo Creed, he was a out and out boxer who's boxed to his strength, and that's what he did. And I tend to agree with the combination of both them, and probably and Russ. I'll probably be that one who's going to be in the middle because I use both on a daily basis. And I can definitely see value to both, although I definitely have an edging at the moment towards teams.
Interesting. That's interesting to hear the support, because it used to be quite fashionable to hate teams. And the one thing that I will say, and this is a bit of a Microsoft feature, is none of it's very intuitive. Like the test call that we all knew and loved in Zoom and Skype, I mean, you get points just for finding out and remembering where that is from one thing to another. And then the other day I had to do, I recorded on Teams, and it's so clunky to start and stop, and you can't pause the recording. And, you try to switch off the recording and you've switched off the transcribe. So the whole user interface in a lot of Microsoft products is really the weak point. However, I will say this, and Tim's kind of explained how this came to be. One of the features that Skype had was that people called you in, right? So if you were scheduled on a Skype call, a team call, you'd be in the office and suddenly 30 people's computers would be ringing in unison, and they drag you in. You couldn't really avoid the meetings. And then the bit that they've done in Teams that I think is really great is, as somebody starts the call, the first person to start the call, everybody gets that little notification pop up. And instead of trying to find the meeting in your calendar, you just join the call that somebody's started. That, and it stays up, I think, for like 30 seconds. That, I think, is genuinely the best of both worlds. I think they really got that little feature right.
So I agree. I love that feature.
So the thing is, like Skype, what was amazing was the lean and mean, the simplicity. You know what to press and what it does. And now I remember when it became Teams, there's just so much. And I think a lot of people still appreciate and miss, now they miss the simplicity of it. It's like now all these platforms and it's Teams, it's Zoom, etc. They've got so many extra features. So they're all trying to do as much as they can to cover as much I guess market share as possible, but you can't do everything well. You need, you've got that feature, and now people want to do it for webinars and podcasts and so on and so forth. So it's making it really complicated and clunky and unuser friendly. And because of all these different things that they do, they have to do updates all the time to fix bugs, which means when you have a call, it's updating, and now I'm late for my call, and then my laptop has to reboot, and I tear my hair out 4 times a month because of Teams. And I don't use Teams. I have to because people want to use Teams for I don't know what reason. I love Google Meets. I'm sorry. It's easy, simple, intuitive. Does what it's supposed to be. And it's stable. Google Meets has been the stablest platform I've used for calls since COVID.
And
I had to use it in Africa. Everything else didn't work except Google Meets.
Here's a key thing about Google Meet is it's free. They're not trying to do anything. And I think that's a really key feature, right? I mean,
there is a premium feature now.
There's a premium feature, but that's because if you want to do recordings. The recordings on Google Meets, I've just started using it recently, is amazing. It's easy to use. So obviously that's because I've got business, Google Business, etc. And it's intuitive, it's easy, it's simple, and it's worth the value that you get for what you're paying for. It really is. And the secret here is just the simplicity. I know what I
Right.
use it for.
It's so simple, it doesn't give you all the features that you need
No.
from an IT service standpoint. And
Yeah,
because
What
there
I
are
need-
times
what else
in
would I
meetings,
need for a
to
call?
see somebody who has been invited to the meeting, I need to see their screen so that I can walk them through something in a meeting. They can't present their screen. I can't take over their screens, and it doesn't work from a support model. So I have to use something else. Zoom, you can do that. You can do that in Teams. I don't know if you can do it in Skype. You can do that with an iPhone on FaceTime. I mean, it's crazy, but you can't do it in Google Meet, and I wish they would. It's a very simple thing to implement, and to me,
So,
that's a no-win.
So
I don't know
wait,
about that, Tim. I don't know if I want to take over anybody's desktop. That doesn't sound
yeah,
right to
nor
me.
do I.
I
But
don't
No, I
think
do it.
that's-
Them
There's at least
watching.
you know.
I don't ever do it. I don't ever do it remotely without them watching. They are watching when I do it, so they know exactly what I've done.
But isn't that a feature of remote control software rather than sort of the video
Remote
conferencing,
control
which is what we're
software.
talking about? That's a
Yes.
different story, right?
Remote. So you go with something else.
Okay, so we're talking about about Teams and Zoom and everything else. What about Slack? Let's talk a little bit about Slack.
Well, okay, but
Because-
before we do that, Christian, I want to go back to something that Ryan brought in, which was about
Yes.
Google starting to have a premium. This is where things go from being simple and innovative. So back in the day, Skype let people call their relatives in different countries. That was an amazing thing, right? We loved that back in the previous century. Let's go there. Right? And then and then when lockdown came, we all work for big international companies, so we're all used to this, right? But for most people, they hadn't done that. So Zoom was a game changer just to keep families together. And it did what it did, and everybody got it. It was intuitive and it was lean. And the same way that Ryan is saying, yeah, now Google wants to make a bit more money out of the platform. What I noticed, because I was a big Zoom user, I even paid for the premium stuff because I was working more independently. I just noticed that they keep adding features that you can tell are asked for by large companies with big IT departments, and
Yes.
they've got certain requirements, and it just makes the administration of the product too difficult. It's too difficult to do the simple stuff.
For the
And
small
frankly, I gave up. I stopped paying. I said, I have to use work for work. I have to use Teams, so I don't need it. But I used to like their product more. And then I said, no, you've made it too difficult to use. So I'm just not going to pay for it.
And I think you've made a really good point there, Russ, is the fact that it's always about the mega corporations, the big companies. But if you think about it, the SMBs represent the biggest demographic and probably the best market to go after and produce something that is simple to use and that can also integrate easily. So the integration part, and now the big buzzword now is, and it's getting like daily use, is APIs. APIs make things easy or difficult, but if it's simple, this is where I think there's really a potential of looking at integrating into other systems easily. So if you're going to build a product, make that product amazing, but also make that product easily integratable or easy to integrate into, depending on how you want to map it out. And if you can Lego blocks, so I think that's something that maybe would need to be suggested to these bigger corporates. And I think there's a company that does that pretty well is Odoo. Their ERP, every component that you need for your business is a standalone app. So you can either have just one or you can have the whole suite and for the same price. And I think it's really clever. And so maybe Teams would need to be simplified. And then, I mean, it's Microsoft. So Microsoft is huge. If they could just break down each element and component, perfect that, but make it integratable easily into each other, into the different elements of Microsoft?
So,
I-
so
I
it's interesting
get
you say that
better.
about Microsoft, because they are, they understood it literally in the year 2000. Actually, they understood the value of services. So suddenly everything was an API and a service. So they're quite good at that. And the vision back then was that SharePoint would be the window onto the world and everything would be that. But again, the user interface let it down. So they came up with Teams as a front end, right? Which ironically was the 7th product. So SharePoint was basically 6 products all bolted together. And then you had Teams as a new front end. So suddenly you had 7 products, right? And people still don't really know how to use Teams because the interface is so clunky. And yet it's really, really powerful. It's all built on SharePoint, of course, plus the Skype for Business integration, which was literally just kind of shoehorned in there. But yeah, internally, it all works through APIs. I mean, it's the whole backbone is APIs. So probably if you've got the time to do the coding and integrate and link it, you can build your own wonderful custom system.
Again, it's got a webhook.
Yeah, it's interesting you bring up the.
Go right
Sorry,
in.
Tim, go ahead.
No, I was just to say it's got a webhook, and you just make a web API call, and you're in. I mean, there's over 2,000 integrations with third-party products, and Slack's got just as many, if not more. I mean, it's there. And speaking to the Microsoft platform, if you're a Microsoft shop, Teams is the way to do it because it integrates everything. It's all one fluid thing, and it all can be done from Teams, aside from email. It's amazing.
But then they would
Email
need
you
to
can, Exchange
simplify.
and Outlook.
It needs
Huh?
to be simplified.
So sorry, I was talking to Tim's point. I said Exchange and Outlook you can integrate. You can do all
Yes.
that. But here's
Yes,
a question somebody pointed out to me yesterday when I said I was coming on this show: is why haven't they made Outlook part of Teams? Why haven't they pulled that in?
That's a good
That would
question.
have
I
been
think
clever.
that would just make the interface clunkier. To everyone's point, I don't think that's
Well-
necessarily a good idea. Go ahead, Ryan.
And I think the point is to drive away from email. If you look at Slack and you look at Teams and any other IM tool, I mean, we live with WhatsApp as another channel. It's instant messaging, persistent messaging that they both give you. And I think the thing that Slack still gets better, more correct, I'd say, than Teams is the threads. Teams just can't get threads right. You could have your chat inside a channel where you can post something and then have people reply to it. But that intuitiveness of Slack, where you can you can reply to something, and that creates a thread that can be sort of stuck into. I think that's why one works definitely and that's the Apollo Creed thing. Much better boxer, much more style, much more grace, versus the Rocky Balboa sort of analogy of Teams, which is I'm a big hitter now, and then I was light on my feet in the beginning. It gets more and more clunky as you go. What we do in 2 different places is I find we use meeting chats, which is where Outlook comes in. Obviously, you create your meeting, and then the chat from that meeting becomes the chat for that topic forever. And then that gets mixed in with all the other chats, and then that makes searching Teams quite difficult. Whereas in Slack, because you're not using a team and you're not using a meeting to have the conversation, you can have a much more constructive chat with threads, and you can search a lot more effectively. So I think that's where they've kind of, I don't think either one solves it perfectly, but I think in certain cases one solves it better than the other one does.
I think I've used Slack, and I really just saw it as a chat platform. Whereas I can have the chats going on in Teams, I can create a chat, name it, add external people to my organization to it. We all are going. We can share files within that chat, and I can pin that chat to the top so that it's always available to me. To me, it's not a problem. When I'm done with that project or that thing, I can move it out. If I create a Teams channel for them, then I can just add them externally to that, which allows them access to the SharePoint site, and they can upload files. They're part of the chat within that team. It's all, to me, all of those issues that you have are easily addressable. It's just a matter of the
and
way.
that's the thing. That's why I've aged. For me, Teams right now is in the age ahead of Slack, because we've gone away from the which I'm trying to get people away from the meetings chat to having a channel, and internal channels versus external channels, to the point that even our meetings are scheduled from within inside of Teams. So Teams has become the center of the world for us. And to your point, Russ, around SharePoint being the window, I remember those days because I grew up on SharePoint 2001, SharePoint 2003, ScarePoint in the good old days.
Yeah.
And now I think Teams has actually delivered that to some extent for me. So now that I actually use it as my only tool, I hardly open Outlook. And I try to avoid email on the best of days. It's become that place, and having that those integrations to other apps and bringing those other apps in. So having a channel, like we have a team per customer, for example, and we have channels inside there for commercial, for testing, for projects, whatever else it is, and having a window into Dynamics, which is our CRM. And then I'm now trying to get Dynamics to talk to Teams. So we're going into that ecosystem that is Microsoft. And we know it's a mess. Anyone who's worked with Microsoft for any period of time knows that Microsoft is a mess. But it's a mess that's got more things that can integrate together than any other ecosystem. And what Slack lacks for me is even though it's owned by Salesforce, I don't feel like it's connected to Salesforce. It doesn't have that Zoom integration that you'd expect to happen. Yes, you can do Hangouts, you can have a quick chat and a quick call and whatever. That works fairly well, but it doesn't feel like an enterprise end-to-end product. It feels like a bits and bobs product that kind of works to a point you have to stop paying for it. Which Teams is free. So you get a lot of stuff for free.
Makes sense, but you've just brought up another that same point where you mentioned the word enterprise. So so it's always going to be the enterprise, but then I guess so. I'm just going to read one of the comments that were made by I think it's Ghazi Akbar. So he says, so I've been in 2 organizations that use Slack very effectively for all their internal instant messaging and video call comms. And then, because it's free, migrated to Teams. In both cases, the level of communications dropped off a cliff. Messages get missed, people lose touch with the day-to-day conversations going on, and operation becomes more difficult and less efficient. What I've never been able to put my finger on is why. What is it about Slack that made comms so effective, or Teams makes comms harder? So this is what I have in mind, and it's a great comment. And I'd like to, what are your...
This was the bit that I was always going to reveal in this chat. This is the true reason that I don't use Slack, right? And the reason is it's too good. It's too social. So I got to tell you a little bit about me. I'm an introverted extrovert. I don't know any better way to describe this. I love working with people. I'm on this call now because I just love interacting with people. But essentially, I'm really an introvert, right? I don't really know how to do this. I just and I need it. I get a lot from it. But really, I think of myself as a hermit that should really be living in a cave on a mountain somewhere. So there's this kind of 2 things. And when I've got Slack and there's people there and they're chatting and they're sending smileys and sharing jokes, that's all I do. And Slack makes it so easy. It's so good at that. It's just like one long water cooler, which I miss because I work from home. So that's why I stay off. I'm sorry, Alan, and people that keep messaging me on Slack, Manwai. That's why I'm never on Slack. Is if I was, I'd never get any work done.
Distractions.
There's my confession for Friday.
I guess that's also WhatsApp. WhatsApp is very dangerous. You get into those groups and people. So I've noticed in certain groups, and I think Ryan, you can maybe relate to that. You create a group for work-related, networking, etc. But then everybody is quiet. As soon as you go off topic, everyone piles in, and that place just lights up on fire. Like good, bad, ugly, the lot. But then when it's serious, people are just like, ooh, like, no, I'm not going to say anything because I'm going to get sucked into it and then I can't get out. And it's so true. So I guess, but then, then it requires discipline. This is where the self-discipline says, hey, I want to interact, but I need to make sure that it stays very on topic. But you've always got that one person who's a little rebel, who's the naughty one, and who's gonna make that one thing that makes everybody just like want to just let off some steam with humor or whatever it may be. So yeah, but people talk less, but you want them to talk more. But then you've got to have those rules, and it's complicated to moderate that.
Yeah, and so what I find interesting about what you're saying that Russ and even Chris was saying is that one of the reasons why I do like Teams over Slack, and I do think you have to set it up correctly to begin with. And I've watched the transition now where we didn't set it up correctly to begin with. We let it get out of hand. And if you go back to the SharePoint days, let people create as many sites as they want. You have the SharePoint sprawl of all your sites and all the rest of it. Anyone who's done that, you're all shaking your heads,
Yep.
So with that, and now having spent the time setting up teams with channels and team inside teams with channels, etc. What you should get out of that is you're not going to go and look at every single chat to be caught up in every single chat. You should only be going to the projects that you're involved in, which are really what the team is. It's your project or initiative. And then the only time you should actually be pulled in there is if actually something relates to you specifically. So someone should actually call you out by name and say, Ryan, you need to look at this thing. Russ, you need to look at this thing. Because the whole point, and I think this is where a lot of these tools do fall over, is you're supposed to be doing work during the day, not trying to keep track of all the chats that are going on so you're involved in everything. And then when you get pulled in, you can go look in and go, okay, what have I missed? Okay, there's 23 things here. Let me just read through it very quickly and scan it. Much like in the days before this, where you had emails trails that were backwards and forwards and everyone was replying to all, and you'd have 65 emails because everyone replied to everybody. You need to find a way to condense it. And I think Teams does do that better. Now, I don't know, to Gordon's question around why does it seem like it seems like it's less communication. I just think it's more focused. And I think you end up with less sprawl. And maybe people talk to each other more because you phone somebody in Teams. And you don't, and Slack didn't have that for a while. Now they do have it, but I think that's probably I'm hoping has happened. Is people are phoning each other more for the specific topic.
I think you may have put your finger on it though, and it answers the question. You said, and I agree with this. Teams works if you organize it properly, but it's not intuitive. People do not organize teams around teams. They go, oh, we've got another project. Let's set up another team, right? It just doesn't work. And then they number the folders so they stay in certain order, and that doesn't suit. So this is problematic. Whereas Slack just creates threads, which is how people work. If you imagine people at a party, then we'd be in the kitchen talking this kind of stuff, right? And how you would organize your Teams channels, and other people would be somewhere. Well, that's a different channel in Slack. So I think Slack matches much more the naturalistic human behavior. So you don't actually have to teach people how to use it. And I think that's the fundamental difference. It's simply easier to do. And I'm not saying it's valuable stuff, by the way. It's just people are more attracted because it's easy. It's why they used to like Apple products in the first place. Oh, you don't have to be a techie. Just pick it up and use it. It's intuitive. And I think that's been Microsoft's problem for a long time. I totally agree with Tim. I bought into Microsoft because as a small vendor or consultancy, I knew everything we did, we would ultimately be supported. So we had Visual Studio, we had, all the servers. We now use Action Pack, which they're discontinuing next year. Crying shame. But we had a whole suite of stuff, and it's all Microsoft. So you knew one way or another, it would all work together, even though none of it may be, the best in breed. And then you've got all these different individual products which may come up. And look, they might get bought out by Microsoft, and then they'll get kind of sucked in.
Yeah.
But I think that's fundamentally the difference.
Yeah, that's it. And that's something I've always said. There's the right way to do something. There's the wrong way. There's the Microsoft way. And that's, and the Microsoft way. I said that to a consultant one time, and he goes, yes, and that Microsoft way has made me a lot of money. And now that I'm on the consultant side of things, I'm going, oh, yes, they make it easy because it's all integrated. And there are issues where I remember those SharePoint days, and I've seen places where the Teams is set up where they threw it in for every project and every customer and I'm going, no, stop. This is for your team. This is by department. You have a team per department, and that's it. And then you have folders underneath that. And yeah, it's just, yeah, there can be, that's the problem, is some ways it's too easy to mess it up because they want everybody using it. And so that's there has to be some parameters around it. And when you brought up Apple, I go, yeah, I told my dad to buy a MacBook so I go, Dad, what?
Bad child.
Yeah. Well, he was in his 60s, and I said, buy a MacBook. And he goes, why? And I go, just trust me. So he bought one, and he goes, hey, how do I set up the network? I said, I don't know. Where do you think you should click? He clicked there. He goes, oh, there it is. I go, there you go. No problem. I mean, that's Apple. That's the way it worked. And it was amazing. So yes, to your point, I completely agree. Teams can be a mess, but at the same time, that integration is wonderful. One of the things I like best about Teams is when I schedule a meeting in it, I can create an agenda. Then when I'm in the meeting, I click on the notes icon. My agenda's there. I can tick off the agenda items as I'm going. I can create notes from each item. And at the bottom, there's a task area. I type in the task. I can assign it to someone. I can put a due date on it, and it shows up in their inbox as a to-do item. That's wonderful. It's all
Interesting. I think it must be related to people, because Gaz, it really depends on the people, the teams that you put together, and how they interact. Because here we've got another great comment from Gaz. He says, I am a SharePoint and OneDrive guy, but collaboration I have to go with Slack. It's just lean and clean. In my organization, out of 20, no one has ever used the to-do in Teams till date, and I work for one of the big four. Crazy. So maybe, I mean, I guess, you know, these systems have been set up, etc. But I guess it's the users that need to use them in the right way. And for some, we've all got our different logics. So I guess you need to figure out, you know, hire your team based on understanding the same logics that you do, and then it would work for all the tools that you use or want to implement. Or hire a great team and then choose the right tool that would work for that team. But maybe that,
you know, that
sense.
comment about the Microsoft way is really relevant to this conversation. You know, so and you could see why it wouldn't work so well in a consulting company where you've got different people working on different projects and moving around. So I found a feature in Teams just very recently, whereby for the team, you set up a team, your people on it, and you can add a Kanban board. It's called Planner, right? There's not a lot of control, but it's a Kanban plugin. So it's just a list of to-dos. It's really good, and you can collaborate as a team over what's most important. But if you're an organization where the people work on different projects and they move around a lot, that doesn't really work, because you should be organized around projects. So this really talks to, you know, Tim's point. There's the Microsoft way, or there's the highway. You know, if you do it their way, it all makes sense and it's really easy. But they haven't really thought beyond that. It's not catered. They don't cater for that.
Yeah, I agree. There's the Microsoft way has not always been my way, but it's becoming more my way, just because with the smaller shops that I work with, I can implement, you know, it goes back to your business practice. How are you tracking this? How are you making sure that you're not watching over every employee, but you're making sure the project gets completed? It's project management, right? And making sure that your metrics are being met for your obligations. How do you get that? And I really think that Teams is the answer, just because it helps internally. I don't see it's an internal tool that has such power. It can communicate with external, but you have to be careful when you're going to external. And Microsoft has turned on some features so that external people, you can turn it off so that they can't see your status. They can't see when you're online, offline, anything like that. You can just message them. And I like that, because then people don't know who you are, what you're doing. If you're in a meeting or you're available and they just try to call you, well, look, I don't have time for that call because I got another meeting coming up. You know, I don't want people doing that. And I can see, whereas Slack, with it being so chatty, like to your point, Russ, you know, all those chats going on, and it's the water cooler. Dude, I loved your comment about being an introverted extrovert. That's how I see myself. I love these kinds of conversations. But boy, after this meeting, I tell you what, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to put a hoodie on, I'm going to read a book and just let nobody bother me, because I'll be that's okay.
So,
It's the way I am.
There's
And I want to go.
there is an addiction problem with this stuff. Sorry, Christian,
Yeah.
but there is an addiction thing. There's an addiction about being constantly pinged by something, and I think that's what happens with some teams and some businesses. They get caught up in the always something going on situation,
Yes.
which can be dangerous.
and they think that
But the thing about
keep moving forwards. That's the problem. Is the more pings you think, the more progress you're making, but sometimes it's just noise.
It's not.
So based on that, Ryan, like there's a relevant question. How do you measure productivity and collaboration success within your team? And how do Slack or Teams contribute to these metrics? So this is really on topic.
Yeah.
Have a go at that one.
So I'll bring that back to, and I'd be interested. Maybe Tim knows this. There used to be, well, there is a product called the Bloomberg. You know, the Bloomberg app,
Growth.
which traders have always used, and this kind of predates them, but it's much closer to what Slack is. So you use it for whatever you want to, but we were also able to automate it, so we could pick up messages and bugs and faults and turn them into tickets. So it was really that, and it was very business focused. It was also very expensive, right, to have Bloomberg. So, you know, we had licenses for it, and only certain people had its support, and traders and all the rest of it. And it was incredibly productive, and you could very easily put a measure on that of deals completed and tickets. You know, you could easily do that. With Slack, I suppose as long as you rigorously police certain channels that are highly business process focused, I would imagine you could do that. But I think that would destroy the joy of just having fun and hanging out on Slack. I think that there is value in that collaboration. The water cooler moment. Listen, I am organizing an in-person conference at the moment in the UK, and people are all saying, oh, you know, I'd attend if it was online. And I go, no, I want you to make the effort, because you know when you're going to be there, you're going to be having lunch with somebody you haven't spoken to for 2 years, and who knows, you might get work comes out of it, a job, a project, and you'll love it. You know you'll love it when you're there. And they go, yeah, but I've got a call at 3 o'clock, so I don't want to go to Milton. You know, we just have all of these excuses why we don't want to do it, but there is definite value in that.
But another thing is maybe it could be industry or niche related in terms of the choice of either Teams or Slack. And maybe that's the way we should approach that conversation. So is it niche orientated, and then obviously size of business or enterprise?
So something I wanted to bring up earlier, which I forgot, which you just pinged for me now, is, and I'm using ping as a pun on purpose, is we use Teams internally, and then we use Slack to deal with external parties. So if I'm in a Slack channel, I know I'm talking to someone external, be it partners or clients. But if I'm internal, for the most part, and as I say, we're now using channels to set up external meetings. So you've got a channel dedicated to external meetings for that partner or customer. But the idea is that the sort of from a mental switch point of view is that if I'm doing stuff internally, I will probably speak a different way, or I will reference things differently than if I'm in a Slack channel where I know I've got external parties involved. And I think that's a good sort of separation of realms, and using the best of both tools potentially, or at least keeping in sync with both tools to see what works best for your teams, and maybe evolving one or the other. Pick one if you
Interesting. I've never heard of anyone doing that before, because, you know, each tool could do both. But I really like that. I like that mental separation of you've got a different context for being internal with colleagues, and external, you know, you got your jacket on, and it's a different context to remind you to behave differently. I think that's lovely, really interesting.
I like that too, because
Look, it wasn't by design. Okay. Sorry.
Yeah, no, we've had trouble with in some groups I've been in, going, hey, you know, watch your language. We've got external customers on this channel, you know, deleting comments because they're not appropriate. Dude, save that for the water cooler. Save that for when you're outside of work. But having it completely separate, then I need to watch what I'm doing. You know, I'm gonna sit up a little bit straighter, make sure I present myself in a professional manner, which you should do all the time, but that's just is what it is.
Yeah, but
I
there
like-
are people that will, especially we've got a lot of diversity in our teams. It's called that. And some people will swear a bit in a chat, thinking it's okay, and you've got to kind of have a side chat and say, look, bear in mind this is a business and whatever. And where do you post your jokes like you would in WhatsApp? Because again, you're dealing with a generational thing where people have grown up now where WhatsApp is now a core part of their life, or they pass jokes in WhatsApp channels. So why can't I pass jokes in my Teams or my Slack channels? And you've got to sort of teach those sort of things as part of business life skills in some respects.
My only comment is only if they're dad jokes or elephant jokes. So
Okay, you have to give us an elephant joke, Tim.
okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How do you
Before the
know an
next
elephant?
question.
Do you want one? I can do it real quick.
Yeah.
How do
Do
you,
it
know an elephant at the restaurant? His bicycle's
Sorry, say
parked
it again.
outside. I said, how do you know an elephant is at the restaurant? It's because his bicycle's parked outside. How do you know there are two elephants at the restaurant? When there are two elephants at the restaurant, there are not two bicycles, there's a dent in the handlebar. And I'll just leave it at that.
All right. Okay. How do you handle communication overload or tool fatigue when using Slack or Teams?
Hmm.
That comes back
Yeah,
to
so I
Set my
so
status
in
to
both
do not
cases I
disturb.
don't. Yeah, so in both cases I turn off notifications on my phones and on my desktops. I don't see notifications, and I have to intentionally go and look for information, and I do that sort of on a scheduled basis a couple of times a day. Same as email, look at it a couple of times a day as opposed to trying to look at it all the time. That's how I do it.
Do you keep your status on?
I do. It's. I mean, obviously in Teams you can have the automatic status switches based on you being in meetings or not. And I don't go offline at the end of the day like a lot of people do. It goes to away and stays away. It's like online.
Do you really play the game according to Teams? You use it as it's meant to be, really?
So I think I've just found something that works for me. And to be honest, like I said, I kind of lean towards Teams because while Slack does some useful stuff, the thing that really sells me on Teams is the ability to have a phone as well. So when I've been in a country where I can't use my cell phone, I can use data. I'll use Teams with my phone, which I couldn't really do with Slack. So I find it quite a useful all-rounded tool.
I do the same
Unless
as you
it
with
is-
notifications. I won't have desktop notifications at all, but I do cheat on the status thing. I hope nobody at my work is listening, but I just set it to don't show my status. And when anybody challenges me, I just say, oh, yeah, it's not set up properly. It just doesn't seem to work. And the reality is I work stupid number of hours every day anyway. So if they could really see, I'd always be online. So I don't want that.
Yeah, I don't allow desktop notifications except for the Teams calls. Meeting started, that'll allow, but it doesn't. I read a good book called Margin a long time ago. I've got to have margin in my life. I have to keep my mind mentally straight, and I cannot allow all kinds of notifications coming in. I said I structure my day so that I have a set time that I look at and respond to messages, and then I move on and do work on my projects. I have to watch my time, and I can't let any application, whether it be Teams, Slack, Skype, whatever, overwhelm me with notifications. It's not a productive day.
Yeah, so that's an interesting one, I think, because I've got quite a lot of conversations about structuring the day and organizing the day. So I think, Ryan, you can relate to this. We're part of the early morning club. So like the 5 a.m. club. The difference is Ryan goes and works out at 5 a.m. I'm straight at my desk at 5 a.m. So that 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., nothing happens. I know nobody's going to call me, ping me, visit me, open a door on me, nothing. The amount of work that you can do in that time is incredible. And I'm the type of person, once I start doing something, it's very difficult to get me out of it because I'm able to just like focus. Problem is if I do that all day, I'm going to miss every single meeting. And I've even like recently, for some reason, my notifications didn't happen. I missed 3 meetings over 2 days simply because I was like just zeroed in. And if I don't have that pop up, I don't get pulled out of what I'm doing. So that 5 a.m., 7 a.m., we'll call it until 9 a.m., where before anyone gets to work, is when I can really do that. There's no distractions, etc. From 9 a.m., I'm happy with all the pings and pops because most of the work has been done already. And then now I can converse and build those relationships and exchanges. But I guess that's because I have that set time where I know that nobody's going to be up anyway. So I don't need to turn any notifications off. My notifications have to be on or else I miss the meetings.
Yeah, it's really kind of a personal thing.
Yeah,
You got to figure out
absolutely.
what works for you, what works for you, and what helps you to be the most productive you can be.
Yeah.
So for me, it's structuring my day to where I answer in the morning and I answer in the afternoon, and then I don't answer. I can't do it. I got things to do.
I don't know if you guys ever read Tim Ferriss' 4-Hour Workweek, but he was the one that got me started doing that. We had 2 hours. You'd allocate it twice a day that you'd check emails, and then you'd have I don't do the out of office anymore, but you used to put an out of office responder, and also in the signature saying that I only check email twice a day, and if you need to speak to me, phone me, basically. The problem I think is people now use Teams and Slack as a way to short circuit the email, but they don't want to phone you either. So they send you a message, and then there's some countries now that have actually put in, besides the sort of France and Germany, I think Australia has now put in a law as well around working hours and contacting people outside of working hours. Because if you use these tools as asynchronous tools as opposed to synchronous tools, which is what we're saying, then they can be quite productive. And you go and you batch everything. So you go and do your hour of check my messages, check my email, check my Slack, check my Teams. But I've spent 2 hours doing the deep work that I need to do, write that proposal, do that project plan, whatever it is. Then you're not going to be living this frazzled life, which I think becomes quite addictive, which is, I'm constantly on the go, I'm constantly being pinged, and I need to be, the dopamine hit from the pings is the driver, not the good work that you're doing to justify the value you're producing.
Yeah, that's the life I'm find myself leading at the moment. What you just described, Brian, the frazzled life, not from the pings, just from the so many different things and engaging with so many people to get things going. And I miss that that quiet time, that quality time, literally for me, because 5 a.m. is for sleeping. Right? That's night time. That's doo-doo. That's doo-doo. Yeah, no. 7 o'clock as well.
Sun rises at 5. The sun comes up at 5.
The sun gets up. I don't have to get up with the sun.
You don't know when the sun comes. The sun never comes up for you in the UK, so I can understand 5 a.m. sleep.
It's beautiful. No, I'm a night person. I'm a night person.
But no, the night is for sleeping. Remember? I mean, sorry, you gave me the baton to beat you with. Like, that was easy. Night is for sleeping. The day, when the sun comes up, 5 a.m., is when you start your day and be productive.
That's true. It's true in a very hot country. You have to do that, right? It's too hot during the day, so people do get
That's so true.
Come to France or Spain. It's not too hot. During
Spain's
most
not
of
hot?
the year.
Wow.
10 months out of 12, it's not too hot. And then go on holiday for the 2 months that aren't too hot. You go to Africa, go on a safari, etc., and you won't be too hot. You're going to have an amazing year-round experience.
This I can vouch for. This is true. I do recommend it. That is absolutely true. Yeah.
Yeah. I had the opportunity to live in a third world country for a little while, and I like the temperate. When it was cold, it was only 68 degrees Fahrenheit, and holy moly, that was just beautiful to me. I go outside in a long sleeve shirt, and I was perfectly fine, and they were wrapped up in scarves and stocking caps.
It's so cold.
Yeah. And the heat, I live kind of in the South in the US, so I understand perpetually sticky. when you've got heat and humidity, and you just live with it, and you pray for getting to a building with AC, and that's just part of it. So just like anything in life, you have to learn to adapt, and you have to learn to adapt to Slack, or you have to learn to adapt with Teams. Either one is going to be good, but Skype was king, and it I still use it when I'm overseas because it's free data,
Wise words.
and
Tim?
I can.
Wise words.
Hey, you said something really interesting there, and this is true, by the way, is we adapt to the tools, right? And that's really interesting. We change, our behavior has changed according to these tools as well. So
Yes.
in a sense, the tools are changing us, right? The
But it
next
should
one
be
will
the other
be
way
AI.
around.
I
It
know it
the
should
other
be.
way around.
It should
So-
be. I mean, that's
So
where
how does one
37
go about it?
was all about, is just identify the thing that needs to be done in tech and do that in tech and leave everything else alone. Right? Just do the minimum that's needed. But that's not how big software companies make their money. You know, that's not the game that they play.
No. Sadly. Or not, it depends. You know,
Do you-
a lot of people rely on those
do you
jobs.
think? But do you think there is a situation where, I mean, you know, currently whenever you build a piece of software, you're always looking for the lowest common denominator for what you're building, or maybe not the lowest, but you're looking to get the most commonality across the board. But do you think with the technology as it's going, that we could have more personalized products that understand how
so.
we work, and you can have?
I think that's
You know.
Ryan. I think that's the future, the personalization, because we've all done the mass thing, etc., and like try to cover. But we all have, and this is the thing is, we all have our own separate logics. So you'll have a group of people who will take to Microsoft more or to Google, etc., etc. And now the only way forwards, or developing really unique, very effective tools, is by personalizing, and then it becomes a marketing thing where you really got to understand your ICP. That ICP is more important than anyone can imagine. And and like in human behavior, you can't be friends with everybody. You can't be liked by everybody. It's just not possible because we're unique. And so whereas you can regroup demographics and things with common things in common, etc., I really believe that they are the future of SaaS or tech, etc., is try and find people who reason and function and think like you, because then they would be using your product to its full capabilities. That's also the thing, is we're all selecting tools, but none of us are ever actually really leveraging the full capabilities of whatever we're using, whether it's Slack, Teams, Google, etc. I love Google. I'm a big Google fan. I know I use 30% of Google's capabilities, not even. But it's, and then I'm always looking around. What can I find that's more adapted to the way I think the businesses that I structure or I've structured, etc. So
That's like our
personalization.
brains. We use 30% of our brains. But here's what's happening: is all of those tools are now forming, and somebody said this before, it's an ecosystem, and they're connectable through webhooks and APIs. And because that's becoming easier and easier, you no longer have to be a programmer or a developer to connect them up together. When I get into my car, I'm sure all of you are the same. We probably all drive completely different cars using different technologies. We got different mobile devices. I bet all of us get into our car and we're still plugged in. We still get reminders. We're still online. We can still maintain a conversation via this. And those are all things that are a bunch of products made and supported by different companies. So we've all customized that to suit our lifestyle. Now, what we as consumers haven't done is solve that problem, which is now nobody supports my needs. Right? There is no one person that I can go to and say, "Oh, my phone no longer works in my car." Well, it might be a software problem in the car or in the phone, or there's nobody that's collectively responsible. But we'll work that out, right? And I think that's what companies like Meta and Google are trying to jockey for at the moment, which is control of the meta. They want to control everything, because that's going to be big. That's financially huge.
But at some point that's going to, is it sustainable? Is it going to burst? Is it what's going to happen? Because like, you can't do everything, because then the control it has, if Meta has a control of everything, they will dictate how we live our lives, literally.
To the point of those big companies, Meta and Google, they all started out with just one thing. They all started out in their niche. Google, it was search. Facebook,
Yes.
it was Meta, it was Facebook. They created that for university students, and then it exploded as a social experiment. And they were able to get the funds to build all this other stuff and just make it grow. Google, it was based upon their search and then their ads, but they started with one thing, which goes back to you finding the people that think the way you do. Well, go find the people you want to work with, build something for them, and be the best in the world at it, which reminds me of Jim Collins' book, From Good to Great. And he called it the hedgehog principle. Do one thing, do it better than anybody in the world. And for me, that's Teams.
Oh my God! How you caught me and dropped the word, and I'm like, oh no, no vote, no vote.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
Right. Well, guys,
Beat that anybody.
been an hour and a half nearly that we've been here. It's been a great conversation. I think we need to have more of them. Definitely, they're interesting. I'm looking forward to the other topics that will be coming up. Ryan, just keep them going. I think we could literally have 2-3 a month. I'm down for it, because they're enriching. They get us thinking, and I learn a hell of a lot, from every conversation personally. So thanks for this little time spent together, and let's stay connected. Promise we'll only send dad jokes and rhino jokes. And I don't know if you each have a little something to say in conclusion before we sign off, and have a great weekend.
This was joyous. This was a lovely, lovely thing to do on a Friday afternoon. It's really, I feel so much better. I was that kind of stressed out, alerted to all these different messages going on. This is just a lovely way to wind down for the weekend. So thank you all very much. Lovely to spend time with.
The next one, London, we all get together in the same room, lunch, Friday, and we do this recorded, but live in person. I want to try
You're
that.
on. You are on.
Love
Really?
to.
Friday, 4th of October, happens to be my birthday.
Okay.
I'm in London, so get your asses to London. Let's do a lunch. Ryan, come up with a good topic, please, like one that allows for banter, etc. Let's make it happen.
Send us the invite. I'll be there.
Can do that.
Yeah, send me an invite and a check for maybe $500, and I can fly over there. That, or just put me up on a screen, because I would love to do this again. I've so enjoyed this. It's been very enriching to me. It's good kickoff to my Friday morning. It's kind of energized me for the day, and thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of it. And I look forward to future conversations. I think that'd be a lot of fun.
Right, sounds good.
That's been great.
Ryan,
Wonderful. Thanks,
wrap it up.
everyone. Have a great weekend. I think it's a great conversation, and we'll definitely do another one.
Fantastic.
Thanks a lot.
Happy
Bye-bye.
Friday.
Cheers,
Bye-bye.
everybody, and thanks for
Bye-bye.
everyone who attended. Have a great weekend.